Welcome to the analysis of Maharashtra MBA CET 2024, 11th March, slot 1. So overall it is slot 5. Okay, and for today it was slot 1. So we'll just have a quick run through about what was there in the paper. You can say brief analysis. So we'll be doing analysis section wise. We'll be doing analysis about pattern. Was there any change in the pattern or any surprise element? So let us have a look at it. So first we'll have a look at paper pattern. So as you can see from this table, there was no surprise element as far as paper pattern was concerned, and that was expected as well. So logical reasoning, there were 75 questions, abstract reasoning 25 questions, quantitative aptitude there were 50 questions, and verbal ability and reading comprehension there were 50 questions. So overall it was a 200 question paper and of course 200 marks. So it is very similar, or it is same as what was observed in the first 4 slots. Overall pattern was same, but there were some changes internally within the section. So we'll analyze the changes. We'll have a look at changes as well. So let us have a look at paper. Overall paper. So the duration was 2 hours and 30 minutes. 5 options for each question, and one can switch between the sections. So if anyone wants to start with LR, you can start with LR. If anyone wants to start with Quant, you can start with Quant. In between, if you want to switch to LR or if you want to switch to verbal, that was also possible. So overall, I would say it was a good thing that student can choose the section of which his or her choice according to, based on his or her strength, and no negative marking. So we'll begin with logical reasoning section. So logical reasoning section has subtopics. If I want to classify logical reasoning section, we can say it can be classified into analytical puzzles, abstract reasoning, and basically some arrangement questions and so on. So analytical puzzles, there were 4 questions on circular arrangement. Distribution, there were 12 questions. Out of those 12 questions, the 4 were easy but 8 were of moderate difficulty level. So distribution has significant weightage. Quant based reasoning, there were 3 questions, out of which 2 were moderate and 1 was easy. Linear arrangement, there were 6 questions, and comparison, there was 1 question. Direction sense, normally weightage is about 1 or 2 questions, but here we are seeing 4 questions, and suddenly the weightage has increased for calendars also. Normally there are 1 or 2 questions on calendars, but in the slot 1 of 11th March, that is, there were 5 questions on calendars. And rest of the topics, as you can see, the weightage was, there was no deviation, or there was no surprise element. So the weightage was as expected for the remaining topics. So overall, if I want to have a look at this section, there were 75 questions, out of which 39, one can say they were easy, and 36 were of moderate difficulty level. Difficult questions were not there, and that was a fact as well. So one can easily attempt, out of this 75, one can comfortably attempt these 39 which were easy, and out of this 36 which were of moderate difficulty level, one can easily attempt 30 questions or maybe 25 to 30, okay, in a basically shortest possible time, okay, and no chances of making errors were very less, because questions were not really challenging. That is how it was about analytical puzzles and analytical reasoning. Let us go to the next section. Now we will discuss about what was there in the Quant section. So this is how the breakup was. So ratio proportion has a remarkable weightage. Time distance, significantly high weightage, 8 questions. Out of those 8 questions, 6 were easy, 1 was moderate and 1 was difficult. For rest of the topics, weightage was, you can say, no element of surprise. There were 2 sets of DI, as you can see in the last row, and those 2 sets were distributed over 3 questions. Okay, so 3 questions per set, and both the sets were of bar diagram. Clocks, there were 2 questions. Permutation combination, 1 question. Averages, allegation, there were 4 and 3 questions, and so on. So In Quant, out of these 50 questions, 40 were actually very easy. So those who have done percentages, profit loss, ratio proportion, these topics well, one can easily score this, all 40 marks. Okay, out of this 9 questions which were rated as moderate, okay, I don't think you will lose all those marks. One can easily attempt 4 to 5 questions out of this 9. So that is how it was the overall quant section. There were questions in quant where the direct calculations were asked, like the product of two numbers. So there was one question which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 multiplied by 72. Okay, so you can easily do it if you apply your mind. Okay, you are not expected to actually do this multiplication. So overall, it was, I would say, the quant section was of easy. Difficulty level wise, it was easy. Okay, not even easy to moderate. Let us move on to the next section, that is abstract reasoning. So let us have a look at the breakup. So as expected, there were 25 questions, out of which 15 were easy and 9 were of moderate difficulty level. Only one question was rated as a difficult question. So in my opinion, one can attempt 17 to 18 questions comfortably in 20 minutes without making any error. So dice questions were there. In some slot, dice questions were not there. Rest of the things, as we normally expect, they were as expected. That is five-figure series, analogies, odd man out, similar pair, and so on. Counting numbers is the question, one type of question which was there last year also, and this year also we have seen that in abstract reasoning. Now, with this, we have discussed the analysis of quant, then analytical puzzles and abstract reasoning. Now we will move on to check what was there in the verbal section in the today's first slot.
Hello students. To continue with the analysis, this is the analysis of the fourth and the final area or the section in the VA area, which is verbal ability and the reading comprehension. This is the fourth area, verbal ability and reading comprehension. I'll take you quickly through the overview and then also give you a glimpse into each part of the larger canopy or umbrella called verbal ability and reading comprehension. So from an overview point of view, there were 50 questions in the verbal ability section or area. It was the last section in the 4 sections. So there were 34 questions on vocabulary. We divide the verbal ability area into 4 broad categories, and this is a categorization based number of questions. So on one category called vocabulary, there were 34 questions, which in turn were subdivided into various subparts. There were 5 questions on meanings and synonyms, 5 questions on opposites or antonyms, 4 questions on idioms, 11 questions where you were expected to substitute italicized word or phrase, and the fag end was brought in by expectation to fill the blanks with words, which we typically call fill in the blanks. There were 9 questions. So 5 questions on meanings, 5 questions on antonyms, 4 questions on idioms, 11 questions on word and phrase substitution, 9 questions on fill in the blanks, a total of 34 questions in the sub area called vocabulary. Next sub area is grammar, which this time had 4 questions divided into 2 question categories. One, error identification, which had 1 question, and then correct and incorrect sentences, which had 3 questions. Total 4 questions in the area called grammar. When it comes to the third area, a dominant area again, the reading comprehension part, where you are given passages to read and comprehend and answer questions. You were given 3 passages in this slot. Each passage was followed by a different number of questions, 4, 5, 3 respectively. Passage 1 had 4 questions, passage 2 had 5 questions, passage 3 had 3 questions, a total of 12 questions. Interestingly, there were no questions in the verbal ability area. I'll come to that in a minute, but there were no questions on the 4th subcategory called verbal ability. So total 550 questions broadly divided across 3 areas, vocabulary, grammar and reading comprehension, with no questions on verbal ability. Let's check each sub area. First we'll check reading comprehension. The reading comprehension area had 3 passages with questions which ranged from 4 questions in the first passage, 5 questions that followed the second passage, and the third passage was followed by 3 questions. So a total of 12 questions on 3 passages. All the passages were reasonably short. They had very short length. Typically, they can be medium level length or can be long. But this time in this particular slot, all the 3 passages equally were of very short length, barely of 2 or 3 paragraphs each. Going into all the 3 passages one by one, based on subjects and number of questions and how easy, moderate or difficult were they to contend with. The first passage, the subject was on whether money is the key to contentment, or is contentment about not money alone, but as long as you are content, you are fine. It is an easy passage to read, followed equally by 4 easy questions. That was passage number 1. The second passage was about a group of people from an organization or corporate organization who go on a picnic. Right? And what happens there to the author and the other people in that area. It was easy to read, but 2 out of the 5 questions were not direct in question. As far as questioning is concerned, they were not direct. They were indirect. One had to go deeper into the passage to be able to answer questions. 1. 2. There were multiple competing options which could lead to confusion. So the competing options were a problem area. The passage was easy to read. 3 questions were easy. But 2 questions were in that sense a little competitive and hence confusing because of the competing options. The third passage was about human nature and how and why and when can one gain or acquire insights from your human nature. It was an easy passage to read and the questions were also reasonably straightforward, no problem there. This is all about reading comprehension, 3 passages, 12 questions in total. The second area is vocabulary. A total of 34 questions, a very, very dominant area. If you notice, out of total 50 questions, if there were 34 questions on vocabulary, obviously this was a dominant area in this slot. It was subdivided into, as I've already said in the overview, into synonyms, antonyms, idioms, word and phrase substitution, and fill in the blank. That means there were 5 sub-areas in the larger agenda called vocabulary. Taking each of them independently, one by one, particularly the vocabulary section was heavy this time, and all the words in the synonyms and antonyms category were very difficult. You had to be really be very good at vocabulary, should have a very evolved reading and vocabulary to be able to answer questions. Examples include niggard, dainty, pesky, obfuscate, fitter. Just think about it, whether you are already capable of knowing the meanings of these words or are you meant to be deeply well read. Coming to the idioms, out of the 4 idioms, 2 were reasonably easy, whereas 2 idioms were challenging, and only if you have a background of reading, you should have been able to manage it. For example, throw in the sponge is one idiom where typically we do not use it frequently in our spoken language. Third category, word substitution based questions were heavy on vocabulary. Again, you needed to know your vocabulary very well, while the phrase substitution was easy, but it equally required deep reading. That means as far as pure play vocabulary is concerned, both in the synonym antonym category and the word phrase substitution, they were of deeper expectation. The questions in the fill in the blanks, the 4th subcategory, were moderate, both by way of substituting words and phrases, but there were a few blanks which expected you to fill the preposition in the blanks. They were slightly tricky because they were either you knew the preposition which could be used, and if you did not know that, then it may be a tricky one. So you needed to have pre-knowledge of what kind of prepositions actually are used in those kind of sentences. So this is based on vocabulary, the 4 subcategories. The last category, as far as the today's slot is concerned, is grammar. There were 2 basic types of questions asked: error identification and correct incorrect sentences. Typically error identification, where you are given a sentence broken into segments with no options to follow. You are meant to pick one segment where you believe is the error lies. These ones were easy to manage, right? They were easy. This particular question on error identification was easy. But when it comes to questions on correct and incorrect sentences, they were manageable. Not that they were difficult, but only if you had a reasonable, strong foundation with respect to having knowledge about the basic rules of grammar. So in that sense, it was slightly deeper than otherwise. So it was a moderate session, area, but you needed to know your rules of grammar very well. So vocabulary was difficult, reading comprehension easy to moderate, grammar again easy to moderate. Interestingly, there were no questions on verbal ability. Typically, questions in verbal ability are based on paragraphs. Maybe they're asking you to unjumble a paragraph. They might ask you to find the odd man out in a paragraph. Might expect you to form a para. They could ask you to summarize a para, or they could ask you to complete a para where there could be a sentence missing. All these question types are missing. There was not a single question in this area. Equally missing were questions on verbal reasoning, whereas you had no questions on conclusions, inferences, assumptions, courses of action, and cause and effect, and so on and so forth. So these two areas were missing. There were three areas present: vocabulary, reading comprehension, grammar. Two areas: verbal ability, and within that the conclusion based questions and the para based questions were missing. This is broadly what is the analysis of the fourth and the final area called verbal ability and reading comprehension. Thank you.